Clearwater, where they're having a lot of meetings right now with senior management. But now we get the chance to move on to the next part of our schedule. Dan DeCloss, come up. We're going to have a fireside chat with Dan DeCloss. And I get the chance to be able to be part of this. Here you go, Dan. Just to let you know, Dan was going to have an extraordinary, I am a fill-in, okay? He was going to have an extraordinary opportunity to have Chris Johnson, the CIO over at Sensi, was going to be on the stage with you, right, Dan?
That's correct, yep.
And you and Chris were part of where you were, before you started this, you were at Sensi.
Yep, we were partners in crime over there.
Yes. Partners in experience. I like this crime. We're going to talk about crime, especially as you talk about cybers.
Yeah.
But Dan, this is great to have you. We're going to have this fireside chat. So we're going to have a discussion, then we're going to open it up for a few questions. But Dan, talk a little bit about your younger years, how you grew up, how you kind of have this entrepreneurial experience that you kind of had, and how it was instilled in you at a young age.
Yeah. No, thanks. And thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I love being able to kind of help support the Idaho tech community as well. But so yeah, I grew up around here. You know, I grew up in Nampa. My dad was a professor at NNU for many, many years, but prior to that, he had owned his own consulting business in computer programming. For those of us in the room that know programming, he was probably one of the only people I've ever met that knows what APL is. And he was a consultant in that back in the late 70s and early 80s. And so that genuinely stands for a programming language. Had its own unique keyboard and all these things. So I really think I always kind of had this entrepreneurial spirit from my dad. Even though he kind of left consulting and went into teaching. But I played baseball growing up. And so in the late 90s, living on two teachers' salaries and, not having a lot of money, we needed a batting cage in our backyard. And so my dad and I just kind of started to design one and kind of did a little bit of R&D and found a model that fit, really well as a portable batting cage. So you didn't have to pour concrete in your backyard. And then as we did that, we thought, hey, maybe we could sell these things. I'm sure there's other people like us that, wouldn't mind having a batting cage in their backyard. And so this was 1998, I think, was when we donated our very first one to an auction and then started selling them online in 1999. So, it's kind of an interesting time selling things online. I remember my dad was very adamant about as soon as he got an order, he'd want to ship it that day. And I'm like, this is pre-Amazon, right? Pre like Prime. And I'm like, why do you have to get it out that same day? I mean, you order CDs from a catalog and it says 6 to 8 weeks, right? Yeah. But he was always very adamant about getting orders out that same day. But I learned a lot of just kind of general like business, even though it was always a side business and never like a full-time thing.
What did your dad teach in NNU?
Math.
Math. Yep. Wow. So that's pretty cool. So you have math and all this other stuff, but he was really, and think about that. Your dad was focused on the customer experience too, about getting things immediately out when they order and having the fulfillment deal. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely learned a lot of just about how to interact with customers and keep them happy and try to deliver on promises, right?
So what did you graduate from NNU with? What degree?
So I had a bachelor's in computer science.
Okay.
So, it's funny because I would have thought then that maybe somebody had encouraged me to maybe kind of start a company based off of, I built an app for my senior year, which was a stat tracking application for baseball. This was, again, kind of pre-Palm Pilot. They had Palm Pilots back then, but it was PDAs, or smartphones. That's what I'm looking for. And so I remember when I wrote the app, I'm like, yeah, this would probably work really well when when you could put it on a mobile app and be out at the baseball field and tracking stats. Sure enough, there's a pretty well-known startup now that pretty much owns that market called Game Changer, and it's the same idea, right? So lesson learned there. But my senior year in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. A lot of kids in our program were kind of going to look at programming for like video game makers and things. Halo was a huge thing, right? And so people, and I was like, I mean, nothing against video games and programming video games, but it just didn't kind of match where I wanted to be as a person. I genuinely want to help people in a different way. And so I was thinking about healthcare, and then I kind of got tuned into security a little bit. And
Oh, but that was really early though, right?
Yeah, this is 2004,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, security back then, from my exposure, was a lot of antivirus stuff,
Yeah.
right? Things just Symantec and McAfee and Norton kind of catching all these viruses and just being kind of a big nuisance. But I was really intrigued with how do we stop this from happening in the future and those kinds of things. So fortunately, at NNU, we have this thing called Senior Seminar where we present our senior projects, and they bring in guest speakers. And they brought in a guest speaker who was a former alumnus of NNU, and he at the time was the security director for ConocoPhillips, cyber information security director. I believe it was ConocoPhillips. But anyway, he had worked for an ISP up in Alaska, and told this story about how he tracked down a cyber criminal in conjunction with the FBI. And I was just glued, like, this is cool. So I want to figure out how I do that. I had already done some research on some cybersecurity programs for master's degrees. So I just went up and asked him, like, have you heard of any of these things? How do you get into this space, right? And I think in general, we did a webinar yesterday on how do you jumpstart your cybersecurity career, because getting into cyber can feel overwhelming and intimidating, even though on the flip side, we have a lot of need and demand for cybersecurity professionals. So he actually knew of the program that I had looked at, which was through the Naval Postgraduate School. And so he introduced me to a professor by the name of Chris Eagle down there, and got connected with the right people to apply to the program and got accepted. And then went down to Monterey in 2005 to attend the Naval Postgraduate School for my master's degree in computer science with an emphasis in security. So
that inspired you. And if you wouldn't have had that little igniting moment, that was great for you to have that. Did I need to have you guys think what kind of what position did Dan play in baseball? Just think about it in your mind. Okay, what did you play?
I was a catcher in first base.
Okay,
yeah.
Good to know.
Could not pitch. Well, I could throw right down the middle where everybody could hit it. So.
Oh, is that right? So
yeah.
Didn't have to drop the curve.
Yeah, didn't have any movement on my fastball.
Well, that's important to talk about movement and sliders when you talk about cybersecurity, right? Because people are always trying to get around. So now you have decided you go to this graduate program, the naval one that you went through. Did then what happened in your career?
Yeah, so I mean that was a great program. It's called the Scholarship for Service program. It's still around. I encourage anybody that's maybe a student or looking at getting a master's degree. It's a guaranteed job in the federal government for sure, and because you just owe them time back as for the scholarship. But that's really where I got exposed to cyber and just rubbed shoulders with some really brilliant people. Started my career in the DoD. Again, always had that kind of itch to own my own business at some point or to do something of my own, but didn't have any ideas as to what that would be. But as I kind of progressed throughout my career, I ended up working for some defense contractors and then some consulting firms, and I narrowed in on penetration testing with an emphasis in application security, and just found this broken engagement life cycle. A lot of pain around writing reports for pen tests and engagements, delivering those reports, copying and pasting information between reports, coming back a year later and rewriting the same report because nobody had fixed anything, and just a complete just broken collaboration between the people doing the testing, whether that's an external consultant or an internal team, and the people responsible for fixing those issues, and really just having no visibility or limited visibility on how those issues were getting fixed.
Were you a civil servant at this point?
Not early on, I was.
Okay.
And then moved into defense contractor and then consulting.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was kind of like a pain point I had recognized along my journey, but I still didn't know. I still was like, I want to start a company. I want to do my own thing, and didn't know, I kind of came to the resolution that you're not going to have this like immediate like world changing idea, So I figured, well, I had actually was working remotely, and I started just working at a trailhead. I think that was in the late fall of 2015, just kind of going down there because I was attracted to some of the programming they were having. And I'm a perpetual student. I always want to learn. And so like, how do you be an entrepreneur? What does that entail? And what are some of the things, what are some of the roadblocks you should anticipate ahead of
That's when Rhino Zoller was down there?
Rhino and Jeff Reynolds. Yeah.
Right.
So So they started this program in the early winter of 2016 called Idea Set Go. And I had already started writing the initial code for PlexTrack, right around then, just because I had this problem. Maybe I'll just start here with this, with this pain point. I don't know if it's going to be a thing or not, but that's what I did. And then I did this Idea Set Go with Jeff and Rhino, and that kind of helped. It was kind of an initial foray into how do you validate an idea, that you would actually get some metrics or some objective data around pursuing it to be a business, right? As opposed to just, hey, does this sound like a good idea? It sounds like a great idea, Dan. And then you go off and do it when Jay would never pay me for that.
Yeah.
Right. So those kinds of things, just some, eliminating bias. Right?
But you were not at this point. Were you with Sensi?
And no, I wasn't. I was actually with Anthem Blue Cross at the time. Yeah. So I started doing this, and also through Trailhead did their Startup Now series, which we kind of concluded with a pitch deck and a pitch night. And that was really where I kind of exposed PlexTrack. That's where I got the name for PlexTrack. And that's kind of where I exposed it to the world, so to speak, in a pitch night in Trailhead.
At Trailhead.
Yeah.
That's exciting because that's where you actually got the structure of you putting it all together and how you kind of brought together this whole PlexTrack idea.
Yep. Yeah. So like shortly after that, actually went to work for Sensi. I had an opportunity to be their security director. Was doing PlexTrack on the side, was kind of getting that exposure to the building of a security program at Sensi. That's where I met Chris Johnson, and continued the nights and weekends thing of just building out PlexTrack, trying to get some early customers, and started to do that. And finally in the kind of the late fall holiday season of 2018, I kind of realized, hey, like there's just so much going on with PlexTrack. I can't keep it all straight, while having a day job. And so, kind of made that decision. I think we talked about kind of my risk management approach. Being in risk management, being in cybersecurity, you're always kind of like, hey, what if this goes wrong, right? So I really kind of had to back my way all out. And we'd been saving money and kind of planning for things, like thinking that this could be a thing. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to come to this resolution, like what's the worst that could happen? And really the worst things that can happen have nothing to do with where I'm working or what I'm doing for, day job, right? So if you kind of say like, okay, well, there's no way to really mitigate some of those worst unknowns. So when we talk about, my profession, I've always believed in myself, and To always been willing to do whatever it takes. So if this doesn't work and I have to go get a different job doing whatever, I'll do that. And that's kind of where I came to the resolution, like it's worth it to go after this and try it. So I gave notice, gave plenty of time, and March 1st is when I dove into PlexTrack full time.
March 1st of what?
Of 2019.
2019. By the way, I wanted to say Chris Johnson, he was going to be here, like we mentioned. He had a ski accident. He's on the mend. Everything's okay, but he just needed to be able to do that. So this is great. So now you've got this thing. You've got this March 2019. You have how's family and your spouse and other people that are around this? Because when you take this risk, you're leaving this wonderful job at Sensi, right? You're really safe, secure. You got retirement. You're building all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, just first and foremost, like I'd probably still be at Sensi if I wasn't doing this. Sensi's a great place to work, great people, great company. And so, yeah, no, it is a great job. But I just always had that inner burning desire to be an entrepreneur and do my own thing. So, but my wife has been super supportive through this whole thing. She's always believed in me, which is a huge blessing, right? And so, really, actually, very excited about it because I, wouldn't be doing like 3 jobs, right?
Yeah.
Basically would have 1. So been supportive and extremely, supportive the entire time, which has been great.
Which is good. So we're gonna talk about the 3 things you've learned along the way, but now let's talk about first of all where you've come from to March 2019 to where you are today, where you got $70 million infusion of cash, And you also, before that, you had Stage.0. We have Andy Scoggin with Stage.0 with us here today too. And Stage.0 helped you along the way. Talk about that process of how you grew it from a capital standpoint.
Yeah. So, I kind of figured that this would be an idea or a company that would need capital, right? But I genuinely did not start March 1st, 2019 with a plan to go do that. My plan was continue to build it while doing consulting work, right? So be a user of my own software, but not maybe a month and a half after I was, had quit, or dove in full time, however you want to view it. I was introduced to Mike Self with Stage.0 and met him at the Oahe for lunch, and another, actually Zach Chatterton was there
Zach
as well.
was there
Yep.
too?
And
Gather.
so from Gather. And so, just told him kind of what I was doing, and he was really impressed. And so we just continued to get to know each other. I was excited about kind of what their model was coming into Boise and planning a flag here with a Boise fund. So just continued to do the whole kind of get to know you kind of thing, and then signed a term sheet with them in August of 2019. So the summer of 2019 is when we signed the term sheet with Stage.0, and that's really what got us off to the races. That's allowed us to go hire some people, start doing some actual marketing. And so those are just some of the things that I've learned along the way, is like, how do you navigate? I mean, just always having to wear multiple hats early on, right? And what is the most important piece of the business I should be focusing on right now versus, getting good people around you to help with the expertise, while managing cash and all these things.
Yeah.
So those early days are very, very challenging in that regard.
I had an experience, you guys, with Dan. I'm sitting in Dan. The lower office was in the lower room of the Stage.0 place off of Main Street, right? Mm-hmm. I walked down there to meet him, and he hands me a floppy disk with all this data. With this information. It's a marketing deal, right? I take it home and I put it in my floppy disk drive. And no, I didn't. Does anybody have a floppy disk drive anymore? I'm just kidding.
5 1/4.
Yeah, 5 1/4, right? It was great. But so now I know, this isn't about capital, but this is more about the talent side. And so talk about what PlexTrax does and the talent demands that you've experienced over the last 2 years.
Yeah. So we took that initial idea of improving the workflow around security assessments and helping automate the reporting and delivery of results while aggregating data around it. So things, we kind of call it in the proactive security space. So we bring in data from lots of other sources of assessments, whether those are manual assessments or automated, and then allow for the tracking, remediation, and analytics on the back end. So we really focus on the entire workflow around vulnerabilities and risk. So as we've continued to grow, that we've continued to need more talent, obviously on engineering and product and marketing and sales and all these things. So
about 90 employees now, right?
I think we topped over 93 just this week.
Wow.
And it's crazy. At this time last year, I think we had 12 or 15. It's been a explosive year for growth, and that's due to the infusion of capital. That's how we were able to do that, which is
grow
great.
And scale the company,
right? And so that's exciting. So we invest. What's the best way to invest? To use investment dollars? It's really to get good people to go and continue to build good services and products, right? And make a difference in people's lives. So I don't know. I forget. Was that an answer to a question?
Yes. I can't remember.
I know.
No, actually, that was. So that was exactly, what does PlexTrax do? And then if you can just talk about the growth of the talent demands that you've had, right?
Yeah. So obviously, early on, we really rely on people's referrals, bringing people that have worked with other people, including recruiting talent and those kinds of things. So just finding all the ways and all the levers we can pull to get people in the door, get the right people in the door, is just always going to be kind of a challenge. But now as we're continuing to grow, finding ways to continue a remote/hybrid culture, and just going out and really looking for the best people that we can find is always going to be the goal. And how we do that is through referrals, through networking, and also now through bringing in recruiters and we're hiring some internal heads of talent and those kinds of things to do that.
So this culture is really big, right? So that's where you probably have a major focus on your culture, what the PlexTrax culture is about. Can you talk about what top 2 points of that culture?
Yeah, so I will say, our core values and our culture, are kind of like, here's how we got to where we are and what we want to perpetuate moving forward. One of the biggest ones to me is positively impact people. We want to make a difference in people's lives. It's not all about building a successful business. That's a means to help us make a difference in people's lives, make a difference in the employees that we hire, and provide good jobs and good living for them.
And that's that create meaning, right?
Exactly. Yes. But also in turn, take care of our customers in a very exposed industry, right? Where, we want our customers, our goal and our mission is to keep them focused on the right things, right? And so are we doing everything we can to keep our customers focused on winning the right security battles, so that they're highlighting and focused on the right risks. And then anybody else that we have in interactions with, whether those are vendors or, consultants, and anybody that we touch as a part of PlexTrack, we want to make sure that's a positive, that we leave a lasting impression in a positive way on them. So that's core to who we are. And then just continuing to be collaborative and working together to solve problems, and what I kind of call staying above the accountability line of not getting into this mode of, hey, that's not my job, or I'm not qualified to do that. It's just all working together to collaborate on solving problems and moving the ball forward.
Awesome. So everybody, how many people in here are entrepreneurs? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people want to start a company? Anybody? Okay. Or are? All right, so let's talk about, really, we're going to have, you go into 5 minutes on this, a little over, but I mean, if you can, talk about the 3 lessons learned, that your key 3 lessons that you could give advice to us about what Dan DeCloss learned on this last couple of years. Yeah,
that's a good one. I think first and foremost, I say don't give up, because you're going to get a lot of skepticism and maybe implicit denial, so to speak. Like, people aren't saying like that's never going to work, but that you can tell they're kind of thinking that. And so I say that, and like, don't give up if you truly believe that it's going to work. And I couldn't say like one of the big reasons I decided to go ahead and take the capital from Stage.0 is like, hey, I think this is going to work, and this is going to accelerate success or failure, right? I didn't want this thing to drag on for 10 years if it wasn't going to work. And now that's not to say that I'm being reckless with cash, or, but it's just like, hey, we're going to go all in and go all out. And if this doesn't work, we'll know. Right. And and that's the risk that early stage investors take. And so we all go into that eyes wide open. So I think having that grit and determination to believe in yourself and the progress that you're making, while keeping guardrails on, what are the leading indicators of success or failure. I would say that's one of the biggest ones. The next one is find good people to surround yourself with. We're always looking for the best and the brightest, and I'm humble enough and always going to admit that I am not the smartest person in the room, and I don't know everything. Never built a business before, to this scale, and so always looking for advice and mentorship to continue to grow the skill sets around us to be successful. And then the third one, I think, is just continue to focus on what are your superpowers, and stay close to those. I guess it kind of is tied to the talent, but don't get discouraged about the things that you don't know or you can't do, and work every day to get better, and bring the people around you that can help you perpetuate the business forward. So
I love that. So the first one is having the grit, determination, knowing your metrics. Second one, surround yourself with wonderful, awesome people that believe in the mission and everything else that are going to help amplify. And the third is really around making sure that I need to get that. What was it? What was the third?
What's that? Yeah, yeah. I mean, say
Superpowers,
focus
that's
on
what it
your
was,
superpowers and,
Yes.
and yeah.
I love
care
that,
for the others.
superpowers.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a big old
If you
S
have
on
one,
Dan DeCloss
I don't
right
know.
here.
I don't know that I have any superpowers.
No kryptonite, no kryptonite.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just have a room, we're not gonna have time to take any questions off of our hop-in platform on remote ones where we have a lot of people, but any question that anybody has that's burning right now, they'd like to ask Dan DeCloss, CEO of Plextrack. Yes, back here.
So, the company sounds kind of vague to me, like a layman, but how would you distinguish between, say, quitting and pivoting? So, did you just say, I'm going to do this one thing and not quit, or did you somehow pivot along the way?
For the online audience, I'll say, so distinguish the difference between quitting and pivoting, and what might be some of the criteria for making that kind of a decision. So I would say we haven't pivoted. We've only continued to expand and grow what our mission and capabilities are, and that was always part of the plan, right, and the vision for the platform. So I think it's sticking to the idea of like, this is going to work, this is how we're going to start, but we see a path and we see a way to continue to grow. And so validating the kind of the add-ons, right, or the expansions of the platform is what we really needed to make sure, like, hey, is this going to work? Can we start doing, getting more than just gut feels from people, but actually, define metrics. So we haven't pivoted. We've only expanded, if that helps. I would say, it is an important thing. It's an important distinction of, hey, maybe, as you go, way leads to way is kind of the phrase, right? So you might actually see, this doesn't seem to be working in this space, but we see a very applicable, and relevant service or offering in this adjacent space, and so now we can explore that. And I think that's just being mindful of the fact that, yeah, it may not work this way, but still be cognizant of what are the other opportunities that exist with the current solution that you have.
Yeah, thanks for that. One more question. Anyone? Of the three lessons that you mentioned, are there any one of those that you wish you learned earlier, or maybe failed at sooner, where you could have iterated on it sooner?
Good question. Yeah. So the question for those online, of the three, lessons learned, is there any that I wish I had learned sooner? Right. I mean, I would say kind of not really. I always had that kind of that grit and determination early on. I think in some respects, maybe could have started a little sooner. In terms of getting more people to help. But have always been of the mindset of like, I want to find good people. I don't know how to do marketing. Let's find people that know how to do that. I don't know how to sell enterprise software. I know how to talk to the product that I want that I want to sell them, but I don't have like the processes and mechanisms in place to do that at scale, right? So I think it's just, I wouldn't say there was anything that I regret doing any different. Now it's just a matter of like, can we keep up the pace, right? I think that's another big lesson, is like we're going at a very, very rapid clip, and so trying to keep our heads above water is important and stay focused.
I hear that there almost from anybody that you have. I could have done it earlier. I like that a lot, because I could have stepped out and taken that risk earlier, and if I would have, but that's because you know so much. I mean, the last 24 months have been extraordinary for you on that, Dan. So let's hear it for Dan DeCloss, CEO of Plextrack and extraordinary entrepreneur, an Idaho success story. Stay here for a second, Dan. We're going to just announce the next ones. We're going to have the next, in, again, room one, we're going to leveraging AI to